Hey everybody, and welcome to the week ahead. I got a bunch of things to cover this week. I'm going to go over really quickly what's going on in the indexes. Then I have some stuff to show you on emariders.com, some changes that I've made there that are, again, pretty cool. Nice changes this week and cool improvements based on suggestions from members. So yeah, I want to show that off. And then last but not least, I had another group of people start to ask me about my MMR vol indicator and how I use that in my trading. So I want to go over a little bit of that. Okay, so starting with the indexes, you can see we're in this tightening range. And it's middle of summer. 4th of July was just yesterday. I'm recording this on Sunday, July 5th. And as you can see, we're basically in a tightening range here, and with a nice bounce into the Friday holiday on futures. And so we're just getting tighter, and this is going to break one way or the other. I think probably this week it's getting tight, so we'll see. Are we going to get? Is it going to break to the downside? Are we going to really test weekly EMA 12, or even come in for a monthly higher low again? Or are we going to stay in status quo and like break back up to the upside and see if we can test all-time highs again? Nothing would surprise me at this point. The only thing that sort of has me going, I wonder, is SMH, SMH semis. So we're basically in like a daily downtrend. So here's our high, low, lower high. Actually, I think that this is the lower high here, and then a lower low. And now, but all of this is still above this high. We're still above the 50-day simple moving average. We're still above the weekly EMA 12. We didn't really get a proper weekly EMA 12 test yet. All of this sort of happened above. So I could see us even just getting a weekly EMA 12 test and then trying to make our way back up. But it kind of remains to be seen. It's definitely not as clear as I see, SPY or the Qs. And so why are we remaining in balance in NQ when we're coming down in SMH? Well, there's been rotation in the market. So semis have been retreating a little bit. A lot of big names, MU coming in deeper, SNDK, I typed it wrong, SNDK coming in deeper. NVIDIA not really showing any strength at all. Even leaders like INTC, I think, had a really good week and then just started to give it all back towards the end of the week. Still all in an overall uptrend, but deeper pull-ins than we've been seeing recently. And so while that's happening, what's been going on with MAGs, a rally, a bounce. And so look at Apple. Apple this week was kind of out of control and just going up like crazy. Now, it's also worth noting that as Apple was doing this on Friday, QQQ was doing this. So it's just a different market that we're in, where semis are so heavy in tech that they pull the Qs down in a world where it used to be that Apple could make the whole thing fly. There's just way more money now in semis, and so that's going to have an effect on the market. But all of that strength in the Mag 7 has been helping to keep the Qs from falling over as heavily as SMH has. So I'm curious to see, are we going to see a weekly bounce start to form in names like SMH or SNDK and MU? Here's MU. I think a weekly higher low would be pretty awesome. We haven't even come anywhere near it since way back over here. So I think I'd be interested in a weekly higher low. If you just look at the weekly chart here, we just started to come in. And there was a little rinky-dink one back here, so that was kind of the last one. So are we going to get a weekly higher low again, and then a bounce, which would then, honestly, if MAGs stay strong and SMH finds weekly higher lows, that could really boost us out of this tight flag we're in on the indexes and push us to new highs. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about for the coming week and what I'm going to be watching for. So looking at a few semis names to see do they continue to show strength, and also I imagine that if we do start to see bounces happening in semis, all the money that's been going into financials and healthcare, so you can see XLF had a really big day Friday, heading back towards all-time highs. XLV had a really great week overall, right up at all-time highs now. And so if we do see that rotation where we're setting weekly higher lows in semis and we're still showing strength in mags, I would imagine that we're going to see these start to retrace a bit. Their rally is going to slow down or stop, and we'll see some healthy retracement on these moves as the rotation continues. So that's kind of what I'm thinking for the coming week in terms of the market, and I'll stop there. Next, I want to talk about EMA riders. So this week on EMA riders, I completely overhauled, or I added a new section and did some rearranging in the market overview. So within market overview, we now have a new tab here called RS. So that stands for relative strength. And everybody kind of knows, I think, in the market what RS means and how it works. The way we do it here on EMA riders is we have 3 different lengths of time for relative strength. So we measure 1 month relative strength, 3 month, and 12 month. And we basically measure those against their siblings. So for example, themes, we will measure the themes against all the other themes, and sectors will measure each sector against all the other sectors, and stocks will measure each stock against all the other stocks. And so on the 1 month time frame, you're going to see a lot of rotation. You're going to see things moving quickly, whereas the 12 month, these are like, it's a measure of who's been strong over 12 months, whereas, you know, the 1 month would be who's been strong this month. And so that's kind of a cool way for us to take something that every other site kind of already has, where they can measure relative strength in sectors and stocks, which we also do here in our own universe of stocks. But we then have our own themes, right? This is something that EMA Riders has that nobody else has, where we create synthetic ETFs for our specific themes of stocks, and then we track those over time. So now we have an RS rating on each of our unique themes, and we can measure change over the 1 month, 3 month, and 12 month time frame. And then within that, for each of those relative strength readings, we look at how much has changed in the last week for each of those readings. And so what we have here is the ranking of who's the strongest this week on the 1 month time frame, and how much has that changed since the prior week. And so you can see, you know, it gives you sort of a quick glance at who were the top weekly movers here. So this week on the 1 month time frame, the grocery group, defense group, cloud computing, the space group, and pay, which makes sense because, you know, financials were all up. So those are all up, and you can see how much they've changed here over time. You can sort these. So right now it's sorted by RS in descending order, but you can flip it around. You can even see what's changed the most and flip it around that way and just get a quick look at everything. And then you can do the same with all of your stocks. So you can see what are the biggest weekly movers in terms of relative strength for stocks this week, and you can. That gives you sort of a glance at the top 5, and then you can also just use the change sort here to see the same thing. So that's really cool. And this is, to me, another awesome thing that we have that nobody else has, where we can say which theme is really moving and how much have they moved relative to each other, and what should you be paying attention to here in the short-term time frame. And then within that, of course, you can jump in. You can be like, okay, well, groceries, they've changed quite a bit in the last week. They're up 33 RS points. So let's take a quick look at those. You can dive in, and you see how that's changed over time here as well. You get a little RS rating for the theme itself, and then you can see here's the SX chart for the groceries group, and you can see it against SPY and what's been changing there on the ratio chart, and you can see how it breaks down. What are the guides within that group and all that stuff. So you can decide, is this something that I think I want to get behind, or is it something that I think I need to maybe it's just like for example here, we're a 2-day downtrend, and it's picked 1 day as the ratio guide, and we're sort of breaking up above that, but it could just reject here and continue down. So maybe this relative strength is just a bounce in a downtrend on the ratio chart, and not something to pay attention to until that downtrend is really broken with gusto, and then you can start to think, maybe I want to actually get involved in this one. So that's kind of how I think about, you know, you get the information that something has become relatively strong, but what does that mean? Does that mean now it's going to remain strong? Because we were just looking at a 1 month bounce time. And so now you can come in and look at the charts, look at the ratio guides, and decide, is this something I need to pay attention to or not? So kind of cool. So back to market overview. This is kind of a game changer, where I'm now placing RS as the top level nav item in the market overview, because I think this gives you the most immediate understanding of what's changed over the last week within the market. And then from there, now you can continue to dive in and do all the things that we could do before, where we have AI and analyzing all the different time frames and helping you to see what's been shifting in the ratio charts and for each of the themes and sectors, and you can kind of decide what you want to pay attention to. I don't want to go into too much greater detail into all the other sections here, but if you sign up at EMA Riders, we have tutorials going through a lot of that stuff. Okay, so that's the cool changes to EMA Riders. I'm super excited about that. Just having a relative strength ranking for the themes is kind of a game changer for us. Okay, so that's that. Last but not least, I wanted to go over MMRVol. So this is an indicator that is free on TradingView. I've released it quite a while ago now. And what it really does is it basically replaces whatever volume indicator you have right now. It would replace that, and you'd get this new version of the volume indicator that shows you when, it shows you these bright pink bars when the volume is relatively high compared to prior bars at that same time frame of the day. So it can help you to understand what's happening in real time. And I had somebody ask me, how would I use these to trade? And as with all things trading, I don't think it's, like for me, I would never use just this volume indicator as a signal to enter a trade, but it is something that's super valuable to see because you can use it along with other signals that you have. So I wanted to show you an example of a trade that I took recently using the RVol. Okay, so here's a trade I took on QQQ back on Tuesday, June 9th. And let me just jump out and show you what was the context for this trade. I knew we were kind of looking for, like, this was such a sharp drop that I was expecting a bounce, and I was really just looking for a bottom to get risk free on in case this was, a weekly high or low, which we were coming in pretty close to the weekly EMA 12 here. And so if I jump right back down to the 1 minute time frame, this is where I was using the indicator. And you can see on this move down, it was a super aggressive move. I think it was a 2 minute EMA 12 rider. Let's just check this, put it on the 2 and see. Yeah, so every time it hit 2 minute EMA 12, it rejected all the way down. And then here it had, look at the volume the whole way down. It was just heavy selling the whole way. There were spikes here on the volume, but I was just following the trend at this point, and it was getting extreme. I think, let's just click through and see what was happening here with, I think this is pretty accurate. So 24 RSI on the hourly, 16 on the 30 minute, 12 on the 15 minute, 25 on the 5 minute. So at that point, we're getting crushed on RSI, and I'm thinking the bottom might happen soon. So I'm just watching this trend, trying to be patient, not get in too early. I don't want to be a left side of the V trader, and I'm just trying to find this bottom. And I'm thinking that volume might give me the clue, right? And so let's keep clicking through, go through a few bars. There, boom, look at that candle down. So one of the things I always look for when we're in a downtrend like this is I'm interested in air pockets. I want to see a lot of space between the moving average that's being ridden and price. And because you can see, like, every time that happens, every time you get a big air pocket like that, your risk to reward is pretty good. So if your stop on this move down had to be there and your entry was like right in here, you get multiple risk units up before it eventually rolls over. Now, it's exhausting to keep doing this over and over again. You don't want to just buy every flush and dip. It needs to be in a good location. Like, there's so many reasons to get into a trade, right? So when we were up here, none of these RSIs were as crushed as they are down here. And we had just broken low of prior day. So it wasn't a great place to try to get long, I don't think. I was looking for something a little more, given the volume already. I expected this trend to continue a bit. So I was patient. But I'm always looking for those kinds of opportunities where price gets away from the moving average that's being ridden, so that I can get a bounce up to that moving average that I can get risk-free on. And by risk-free, I mean sell enough of the shares that I bought down here that if we do end up stopping out, I don't lose any money. And that might be half of, like, if I go 1-to-1 on my risk and I get some off, then I got to sell half of my shares. If I get 1-to-3, then I sell a third. If I get 1-to-4, I sell a fourth, that sort of a thing. So I'm watching, and when this candle happens here and I see that volume, that is me going, oh my God, look at this. Look at the volume compared to all the other volume candles in the whole day. It's definitely the biggest one. And like, it was a sea of pink or dark red candles to begin with, but this one really does stand out to me, and it's something that perks me up. And I'm like, oh my God, this could be what's setting up to be a bottom. And look how extended we are from in one shot from the 2 minute EMA 12, which we're riding. So this is not a buy signal for me. I don't use the volume as just like, oh, look at the size of the volume, look at the move down, I should get in. It's not, but it's my alert to start paying attention. Because what I find is often when this occurs, that high volume candle it either is the bottom or it's very near the bottom. And I need price to tell me, when should I get in. So let's see what happens in the next candle. Next candle goes down a little further on lower volume. Next candle down a little further on even lower volume, but look, it's showing a bottom wick. So at this point, I would be interested in a long, because I'm thinking if it breaks the high of this 1 minute candle here, you could even be loosey-goosey with your entry, with your stop, and say, I'm willing to actually give it a bit of room in case we do get another flush. Like maybe there's 685 is the next psychological level down. So I want to go below it, 684.80s, something like that. But when it gets above the high of this candle right here, the high of low bar, then I want to get long, and I'm expecting to get risk-free up here at 2-minute EMA 12, somewhere like that. And so let's see what happens on the next one. You get a little bounce, wobbly, a little bit of follow through, and there's the relief of the pressure. And at this point now, I could be risk-free, up here near 2-minute EMA 12, but let's just see what plays out. And away it goes, and the bounce is underway. And so, that high volume bar was not actually the bar that was the low of the day, but it was the clue that told you the low was coming. And so that's a good example of how I use this indicator. All of this sea of pink doesn't mean buy, buy, buy. It's no, it's just high volume. You're looking for a signal that you can combine with other things, the price action, an EMA rider being ridden, coming into an area where you expect there to be a bounce, extreme RSI. You got to use all the tools in your tool belt to make a good trade. You can't just rely on one indicator. But it's definitely a useful tool to help me understand, what should I be paying attention to, and when should I perk up and really, zoom in and pay close attention to what's going on. Volume is, especially on V-shaped dips like this one ended up being, is really just a fantastic tool to add to your tool set. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. Again, if you're interested in using this indicator, it's free over on TradingView. It's Relative Volume, or RVol, and it's by me. I think my name on TradingView is JM O'Sullivan. So when you go into TradingView to add it to your chart, you just click the indicator button, do Relative Volume, and there it is. By JM O'Sullivan, and add that one. Okay. All right, that's it for me. Watching the balance going into next week on NQ to see, are we going to break this pardon my French, break this equilibrium. So yeah, looking forward to this week and seeing what we can do to get out of these and which direction we are going to go. All right, have a great week. Happy trading.